In terms of the NFL draft and other stories, we have to touch on, we briefly alluded to this, John Humphrey and Grady Vance there with Pete Carroll. So Trojans coaching Trojans. What do you think of Pete Carroll's NFL draft with the Raiders? Obviously, the big decision, not trading out of number 6, but taking Ashton Genty with that pick. But then the Raiders did trade down later to get more pieces, and that's something that Carroll did with John Schneider and the Seahawks. Your overall impressions of Pete Carroll's first NFL draft as the coach of the Raiders with Tom Brady and general manager John Spytek?
The pick of Ashton Genty to me feels similar to the Jaguars trading up for Travis Hunter. It's a bit of a risk in the sense that you're not getting a guy like a Abdul Carter, who's not only, an exciting talent, but a guy who people are pretty certain is going to translate into the NFL. Ashton Genty is obviously put up one of the greatest running back seasons in college football history, but he was also at Boise State. So anytime, you're at a smaller school like that, there's a little bit of uncertainty there. But I think Ashton Genty is also one of the most well-known, one of the most well-liked, one of the most exciting players in the draft. And I think it's exciting to see him get another star running back that, he can kind of build the identity of the Raiders around. He's obviously famous for working with Marshawn Lynch for many, many years, including, and then Marshawn went to the Raiders. So it's like the NFL is all a circle, I suppose. But I think in that regard, it's really exciting. I think it'll get a lot of Raiders fans really excited. I think, Pete was on Twitter the morning of, kind of posting a bunch of GIFs with no context and trying to, get people interested and trying to get people speculating about what he might do and get them, excited. And he made the exciting pick. He kind of delivered. He didn't stir everybody up on what he was going to do and then stay at 6 and draft an offensive lineman that, and nobody had heard of or something like that. Like he went out and got a guy that's probably one of the most famous and one of the most exciting players in the draft. Probably would have won the Heisman if Travis Hunter, wasn't in college football this past year. It took a generational Shohei Ohtani type, the football version of Shohei Ohtani playing like a first-round draft pick on both sides of the ball to beat out, one of the best running backs in the history of college football. So I think from that perspective, it's exciting. Obviously, have to wait and see a little bit on the development side of things, just because he is coming from a smaller school. But it'll be interesting to watch at least, and it'll get some eyes on it. And I definitely trust Pete Carroll's judgment. He's a guy who's been around, seen a lot of prospects, seen a lot of running back prospects specifically, knows what it takes to be a great running back in this league. So I think it was a good pick, and I think the Raiders fans should be excited.
Yeah, what I liked about the Pete Carroll draft was that, trading down in the middle rounds to get more pieces, more swings, more bites at the apple. Like, the Raiders are in a position where they need a lot of bodies. And so trading down to get more picks, take more flyers on more prospects, like that was just shrewd drafting by Pete Carroll. As for the Genty pick, to me, and we don't know this for a fact, or at least I haven't heard Pete Carroll say this directly, but I think when Ashton Genty said, "Hey, I'm going to be the next Saquon, like I'm going to have that kind of impact, I'm going to be that guy," I think that had to have attracted Pete Carroll. Like if he was on the fence in terms of which guy to take at 6, and if there was some friction in the war room with Spytek and Brady about which guy to take at 6, that Ashton Genty talk about, I'm going to be the next Saquon, just in terms of having that level of impact, similar to what Saquon's had with the Eagles. Like Carroll's always compete mantra, like that just seems to fit hand in glove with what Ashton Genty did. Like Ashton Genty is betting big on himself. He's not, trying to be quiet and under the radar. No, he's out there up front. That seems like a Pete Carroll type of personality. I have to think that certainly, if the Raiders were on the fence, that might have been the final tipping point to deliver Ashton Genty to the Raiders. It's going to be fascinating to see how that camp evolves in the summer. Like I'm going to be a lot more interested in the Raiders than I've been in basically 2 decades. And I know a lot of other USC fans feel the same way. All right, so other news of the past week, USC picks up a receiver in the portal. So like USC's gotten some reinforcements on defense. So now you add a receiver to the shopping list. Still waiting for that big, elite offensive lineman. That's still a need. But like receiver was definitely a box that had to be checked. Your impressions of this new receiver USC is getting from Utah.
Quick little fun fact I want to point out, Matt, before we move on, just about the Raiders that I thought was kind of interesting, is
Sure.
that at pick 213, they picked Tommy Malott, who's a quarterback out of Montana State. And then 2 picks later, they picked Cam Miller, who's a quarterback out of North Dakota State. They were the 2 opposing quarterbacks in the FCS National Championship game. So it's got to be interesting being the 2 guys that were competing for the highest glory in the FCS and then getting picked 2 picks apart by the same team and now having to compete for a spot in that quarterback room. Got to be kind of interesting. So it'll be interesting to, on a more micro level for the more dedicated Raider fans to kind of watch that rivalry play out. My money's on Tommy Malott. I think he was one of the more exciting players in the FCS. And I have some family in Montana, so I paid a little bit more attention to him than everybody else probably. But, he's a real dynamic runner and a real exciting player and really beloved out there in Montana. So I think that I'll be pulling for him over Cam Miller, but it'll be a fun little dynamic nonetheless.